The next item of business is a statement by Alistair Allen on tackling fuel poverty in Scotland, Periodic Report 2021 to 2024. The Minister will take questions at the end of his statement, and so there should be no interventions or interruptions. And I call on Alistair Allen. Up to 10 minutes, Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Today is a key milestone as we publish our first three-year fuel poverty strategic report in line with the Fuel Poverty Act, setting out the progress and steps we are making in Scotland with the limited powers at our disposal to tackle fuel poverty. This statement is a timely one, as at a UK level today also sees Ofgem's latest energy price cap rise come into effect. This price cap rise marks the third increase in a row and means that energy bills will be 9.4% or £159 higher than this time last year, despite promises made by the new UK Labour government that they would bring energy bills down by £300. So nothing could be a starker illustration, Presiding Officer, of the necessity that drives the Scottish Government's action in this area, or of how policies driven from out with Scotland run counter sometimes to what we are seeking to achieve in this Parliament. The implications of that, I know, are being felt keenly by consumers across Scotland. And all of that said, the Fuel Poverty Statutory Periodic Report sets out the real and important progress which has been delivered within the limitations of our devolved powers. This has included action towards raising household incomes, reshaping our social security system and providing financial support through our heat and building schemes. The report crucially highlights two important points as to why we have seen the fuel poverty rates increase since the Fuel Poverty Strategy was published in December 2021. First, the volatile nature of increases in energy prices has outweighed gains in energy efficiency and household incomes, leading to increased rates of fuel poverty and extreme fuel poverty. Secondly, that it is only the UK Government that can and must act to use the fundamental policy and fiscal levers at their disposal, especially in relation to fuel prices, which can help eradicate fuel poverty in Scotland. Presiding Officer, the global events that we've witnessed in the last 3 years and continue to see unfold have had a substantial negative impact upon the progress that was being made in tackling fuel poverty. This is together with an enduring cost of living crisis which has led to a sharp rise in our energy bills alongside other essentials, impacting all households across the country and worsening the poverty premium facing those at the sharpest end of price rises, those on the lowest incomes. Our published scenario modelling reinforces the impact of high energy prices on fuel poverty rates in Scotland. To emphasise that point again, this modelling shows that under any scenario wherein 2023 fuel prices had remained at 2019 levels, with all other factors being equal, the fuel poverty rate would now be around 19%, or 472,000 households. In other words, if fuel prices had not gone up since 2019, the efforts that we are making in Scotland would have seen a decrease of around 389,000 households, or 15 percentage points from the current rate of 34% of 861,000 households. To put it even more simply, fuel poverty would now be going down were it not for the rise in fuel prices. But the average weighted index price of fuel in Scotland almost doubled between 2019 and 2023, increasing by 96%. And that is why we invested over £63 million in short-term crisis support through the Fuel Insecurity Fund towards help with household energy bills. We continue to provide ongoing support through the Scottish Welfare Fund and have committed to the further delivery of our island's Cost Crisis Emergency Fund to support our island communities. This is together with our collective policies in support of raising household incomes with more than £3 billion to tackle fuel poverty and the cost of living crisis for households this year. This is a package that spans a range of support for energy bills, childcare, health and travel, as well as social security payments, such as the Scottish Child Payment, that are either not available elsewhere in the UK or are more generous here. Despite those challenges, we are committed to tackling fuel poverty. We want to build upon the success of the Warmer Homes Scotland and area-based schemes delivery programmes, and that's why we're investing £300 million this year into improving the energy efficiency of our housing stock, with 56% of households now at EPC C or above. With more than £65 million across our 3 winter heating benefits this year, which will provide vital support with heating costs to more than 630,000 people. And crucially and relevantly, we will introduce a universal pension-aged winter heating payment of £100 for every Scottish pensioner household not in receipt of relevant benefits, with those in receipt of a relevant low-income benefit receiving £200 or £300, depending on their age. Now, we know that tackling fuel poverty requires a long-term, sustained effort and a whole-sector approach with suppliers, consumers, the regulator and, most importantly, in this context, the UK Government too. This requires the use of the fundamental policy and fiscal levers in making the changes which only it can take, and which the previous UK Government continually failed to use, to protect household energy bills as well as address the legacy of soaring levels of energy debt. Over the past 6 months, the Scottish Government has been working closely with the energy industry and consumer organisations. That work has been to co-design a deliverable social tariff scheme that would actually rise to the challenge and make a difference. And so I'm pleased to update the Chamber that the Social Tariff Working Group's final report has now been shared with the UK Government. Its outputs demonstrate to the UK Government the strength of cross-sector commitment to delivering a targeted bill support scheme. I have in addition set out a clear set of asks from the UK Government as they undertake a review of their own fuel poverty strategy and targets. I'm committed to working closely together on delivering this crucial policy alongside wider fundamental UK Government policy actions as a matter of urgency. Our Fuel Poverty Progress Report, laid in Parliament today, only goes to reinforce that whilst considerable strides have been made, fuel poverty rates in Scotland today are at 34% and are largely due to inaction to date from the UK Government on the fundamental issue that affects everyone, which is fuel prices. Meanwhile, we will continue to engage with a range of stakeholders across Scotland, including the Scottish Fuel Poverty Advisory Panel, and will duly consider their own report recommendations when these come forward. Presiding Officer, like other members across the Chamber, I am all too aware of the human consequences of fuel poverty and rapidly rising energy bills. The Scottish Government, despite the formidable factors out with our control that I have mentioned, and sometimes counterproductive policies originating elsewhere, is committed to countering, mitigating where possible, and ultimately tackling this issue that affects the lives of so many families across our country.
Thank you, Minister. The Minister will now take questions on the issues raised in his statement. I intend to allow around 20 minutes, after which we'll move on to the next item of business, and I'd be grateful if members who wish to put a question were to press their request to speak buttons now. And I call Douglas Lumsden.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's frankly no surprise that this devolved government is trying to take the people of Scotland for fools and shirk all responsibility. The Labour Government's decisions have been absolutely disastrous, but the rise in fuel poverty has the SNP's grubby fingerprints all over it. It's thanks to the SNP that today, across Scotland, council tax is up, rail fares are up, ferry fares are up and water bills are up. Coupled with Labour's callous decision to ditch the winter fuel payment and Labour and the SNP's shared disdain for our domestic oil and gas industry, the cost to families to simply keep them warm is only going to increase. These two left-wing governments are choosing to squeeze household finances with more and more taxes, and the people of Scotland are being left worse off for it. So can I ask the Minister, what assessment has the Scottish Government made of the impact the growing tax burden will have on households in fuel poverty? Does he have any clue when the energy strategy will be published? and the 2021 strategic approach promised an increase in number of whole house retrofits to fuel poverty households. How many homes have had this whole approach retrofit completed so far?
Minister.
Well, in amongst that rhetoric, there were some important questions, and I'll try to address them. But I think I have to say from the outset that what the member is overlooking in all of this is that the single biggest factor in fuel poverty is the cost of fuel. Otherwise, it wouldn't really be called fuel poverty. And because of that increase in the cost of energy, we have seen a massive counterbalancing factor employed against everything that this Scottish Government is doing to increase the incomes of the very people that the member refers to. For instance, those in extreme fuel poverty, those spending 20% of their income or more on keeping warm, the number of those would now be down to 7%. 7% is too many, but we would be on target to meet our ambitions in Scotland to deal with this. But the inaction of successive UK governments the member mentions the war in Ukraine. I do not deny the importance of that. But the inaction of successive UK governments to deal with the fundamental issue, which is the cost of fuel, is why we have fuel poverty.
Paul O'Kane.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I thank the Minister for advance sight of the statement. The update today follows the debate we had on the issue just a few weeks ago, and I think what came out of that debate was quite a solemn realisation across all parties in this chamber regarding the pressures and changes we have seen across the globe, which are stark and numerous. Indeed, the Minister to some extent acknowledged global events in his statement, but we have seen the war in Ukraine, wider inflationary pressures and now the challenges we face with a changing global economic order, not least from the United States in these last 5 months. And while the Minister seems in his modelling to want to wish those things away, the reality is we cannot escape the reality of those previous 5 months. And he may wish to face both ways, but we also cannot ignore the positive steps taken by UK Labour Government today to raise the national minimum wage, for example, to give a pay rise to £200,000 of the lowest paid Scots to deal with that low pay that he speaks about in his statement. And the Scottish Government have more to do against these global challenges. It was the Scottish Government that ended the Fuel Insecurity Fund at short notice in the middle of the reporting period, removing critical support from those most at risk of fuel poverty. So has the Government given any analysis of that and how many people would not be experiencing fuel poverty if the fund hadn't been cut? And secondly, in previous years, the Government has also cut energy efficiency budgets and has massively underspent the £1.3 billion that it had intended to spend over the reporting period. So has the Government undertaken analysis of that and how many people would not be experiencing fuel poverty if the Government had lived up to its own commitments?
Minister.
Well, as I mentioned a moment ago, I would not attempt to take away from the important international events to which the member mentions, not least the illegal full-scale invasion of Ukraine. However, we were told not very long ago by the member's party that fuel bills would be coming down by £300. We were also, I think it's also relevant to say the member asks what the impact on poorer groups would be. I think some of the impacts are aggravated by the situation that pensioners have faced with regard to winter fuel payments, and obviously the Scottish Government, as I've mentioned, is attempting to undo some of that as best we can. But I think the statistics that I mentioned in my contribution, I have to come back to, which is that the efforts that the Scottish Government and the wider Scottish body politic is making to bring down fuel poverty are having beneficial effects, but they cannot outweigh a lack of action at a UK level to deal with the fundamental cause, which is the cost of energy.
Kevin Stewart, to be followed by Megan Gallagher.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. During the course of the general election, the Labour Party pledged to cut household energy bills by £300. Instead, we have seen price hikes, the cap rise and household bills rise by almost £300. We have also seen the slashing of winter fuel payments for our older folks, and we are about to see Labour benefit cuts. I'm pleased to hear in the statement that the energy social tariff working group has finished its work and that the Minister intends to pass on their findings to the UK Government. Can I ask the Minister if the UK Government has in any way been interested in actually looking at a social tariff to help out those folks who are the poorest and most vulnerable in our society so that they can actually afford their bills?
Minister.
Well, despite the significant criticisms that I've made of the UK Government, I have to say that we have had a good conversation, and more than conversation, cooperation with the UK Government in attempting to progress this issue. But as I mentioned, what was significant, I think, about our conversations about a social tariff is that people want it to be based on a system that is simple, not based on an applications system, which by definition almost excludes the most vulnerable people. Want it to include items like income or factors like income and factors like rurality and factors like benefit entitlement. But I think the most important thing that came through in all this, as I say, was that it has to be a system that is not based upon an applications process, or that will simply exclude the very people who need it.
Megan Gallagher, to be followed by Evelyn Tweed.
Roughly 900,000 Scottish pensioners were denied access to the winter fuel allowance last year because of decisions taken by the UK Labour Government and the SNP Scottish Government. So, can I ask the Minister, has the Scottish Government made any assessment of its failure to pass on the devolved pension age winter heating payment and the impact this has had on pensioners living in or on the cusp of fuel poverty?
Minister. Well, the Scottish Government's attempts to mitigate the worst of the UK Government's actions in this area have brought 800,000 people within the benefit of our own scheme. So I don't feel any need to apologise about that. I do think it's worth saying, obviously, that no Scottish Government going forward can ultimately mitigate every act of vandalism that the UK Government performs against Scotland, but we do our best in the areas where we feel we have the resource and where we wish to prioritise it.
Evelyn Tweed, to be followed by Colin Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what engagement it has had with the UK Government regarding Ofgem's standing charges proposals, given concerns from charities that a more complex billing system will disadvantage vulnerable people. Minister.
Well, there has been a consultation on Ofgem's standing charge option within the price cap, and the consultation suggests that any changes will not fix the fundamental issue with the standing charge system. And failing to address the unfair cost of standing charges and overcomplicating bills is perhaps not an effective way of dealing with the ever-increasing debt in the system. And indeed, it's worth adding that it is doubtful that much of the energy debt will ever be paid. So we welcome Ofgem's original consultation on standing charges. Given how many people are continuing to struggle with high energy bills, standing charges of over £350 on energy bills not only contributes to higher levels of fuel poverty, but it also undermines energy efficiency improvements, and so we would look for reform in this area.
Colin Smith, to be followed by Emma Roddick.
Thank you, President Officer. More than half of older people in Scotland live in homes that have poor levels of energy efficiency with an EPC rating of D or below. So, Minister, why is awareness of the Scottish Government's energy efficiency schemes so utterly woeful, with just over a third, 39%, haven't even heard of any of these schemes, according to the Chartered Institute of Building, with awareness the lowest among over 55s? It's a little wonder the Government consistently underspending these schemes and leave so many older people unnecessarily in the cold.
Minister.
Well, the Scottish Government is investing £300 million in investment into our heat and buildings energy efficiency delivery schemes. The Scottish Government is always open to finding new ways of sharing information about these schemes, but the evidence is that the take-up and the people who take up this option are pleased with the schemes that we have, see a difference not only in the carbon footprint of their house, but also see a difference in their energy bills. And so the Scottish Government will continue to put resource and priority into this area, recognising that this is an example of where policy on fuel poverty and on carbon go hand in hand.
Emma Roddick to be followed by Patrick Harvey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. A third of residents in the Highlands experience fuel poverty, with similar percentages in Argyll and Bute, Orkney and Shetland Council areas, with as many as 40% in the Highland and Yar. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that it is outrageous that communities in energy-rich parts of Scotland, the linchpin of our renewables capabilities, have such high levels of fuel poverty, and that Scotland doesn't have the full powers to remedy the situation?
Minister.
Well, the Scottish Government is certainly conscious that the current wholesale electricity market isn't fit for the delivery of our net zero ambitions, or indeed, as the member highlights, for tackling fuel poverty. So electricity market reforms and wider energy policy interventions must have the aim of reducing costs for Scottish consumers and businesses, ensuring that communities feel the benefit of the energy transition, but also protecting investment in our renewables industry and supporting decarbonisation. So we are determined to address the higher levels of fuel poverty found in rural communities like the one I live in myself, and have already taken action to ensure our energy efficiency schemes are seeking to achieve those ends, spending more per head on installations in those areas where we know that the costs are higher.
Patrick Harvey to be followed by Liam MacArthur.
The Minister seems to acknowledge that this crisis is driven fundamentally by volatile fossil fuel prices. And yet we're hearing this statement just 2 days before the Government is widely expected to dilute, downgrade, delay or ditch the only serious policy measure it had on its proposals to get Scotland off the gas grid and using cheap, clean, renewable electricity for our heating instead. And there seems no chance at all of reaching the £1.8 billion investment target it had previously committed to. So with fuel poverty rising and climate targets being missed, most rational people would say, let's speed up. Why is the SNP slowing down?
Minister.
Well, the member is right to point to the volatility of fossil fuel prices, and I've referred to that myself, and indeed pointed it out as one of the primary reasons for fuel poverty. He'll appreciate, and he's indicated this, that there's not much I can say 2 days before the statement on the bill, other than to pick up on one of the questions within his question. There will be a bill. As the Cabinet Secretary has indicated, that bill will have to meet twin objectives, dealing with the very real crisis in the climate which the member alludes to, but also ensuring we do not put people in fuel poverty.
Liam MacArthur to be followed by Stuart McMillan.
Can I thank the Minister for early sight of his statement? I certainly look forward to seeing how his strategy of blaming fuel poverty entirely on the UK Government, while talking up his chances of working collaboratively with UK ministers, pans out. But on the issue of area-based energy efficiency schemes, which have proved effective in reducing bills, heating homes and cutting emissions, you'll be aware of concerns raised by local authorities about a lack of notice of funding allocations, leading to an estimated underspend in the budget of around £60 million. So what steps is the Government taking to either increase the notice given to councils or enable funds to be reallocated in time to allow those, such as Orkney Islands Council, to do more in an area with the highest levels of fuel poverty and extreme fuel poverty?
Minister.
I'm happy to correspond with the member about the specific issue that he's raising there in Orkney, and I would acknowledge the point that he makes about island areas having some of the worst fuel poverty in the country, so I will happily try to be of help. But on his first point, I really don't see a contradiction in seeking to work constructively with the UK Government where we can on areas, for instance, like a social tariff, and pointing out the error of the UK Government's ways, which are leading directly in their inactivity on the cost of fuel to making people fuel poor.
Stuart McMillan to be followed by Liz Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Minister and colleagues across the Chamber will be aware that electricity regulation, generation, transmission and distribution is reserved to the UK Government, so the Scottish Government cannot legislate to require the provision of shared ownership from renewable energy developments. But I'd be grateful if the Minister can tell me, and also the Chamber, whether the Scottish Government has undertaken any modelling on what the impacts would be in the levels of fuel poverty if Scotland were actually able to mandate community offerings from renewable energy developments.
Minister.
Well, this is one of the other areas where we do try to have a constructive conversation with the UK Government. We continue to call on the UK Government to explore mandating community benefits for renewable energy developments to maximise a just energy transition, and only they have the power, in law to change that. However, the greatest impact will come from introducing a social tariff mechanism in the short term to ensure energy consumers are protected against high costs. But the point the member makes is well made.
Liz Smith, to be followed by Colette Stevenson.
Thank you. In relation to the rural issues that have been discussed in earlier questions, can I ask what action the Scottish Government is taking to ensure that the rollout of smart meters increases? Because, quite frankly, in rural areas it is pretty appalling. Minister.
Well, the member has my sympathy on that point because the Scottish Government is more than disappointed about this, not just because of the slow rollout in some areas of smart meters, but also, as the member will be aware, I know the issue of RTS meters, of which there are over 140,000 in Scotland, and which we have little idea how they will operate after the proposed end of the signal to those meters in June. These are obviously matters which the Scottish Parliament, the Scottish Government, has no legislative power over, but I can assure the member I am not slow in raising this either with energy companies or with the UK Government, because we have to get a solution to this before June.
Colette Stevenson, to be followed by Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. High energy prices do remain the single greatest driver of fuel poverty. The SNP Government will reinstate universal winter fuel payments for pensioners this year to help with their bills, following the UK Labour Government's reckless decision to scrap this lifeline policy. Can the Minister set out how the reintroduction of universal support for older people will help tackle fuel poverty in Scotland? And does he agree with me that the British energy market should have zonal pricing, a move which the CEO of Octopus Energy said could see Scotland have the lowest electricity prices in Europe, given our renewable energy production levels?
Minister.
On the member's first point, introducing the universal benefit to which she refers has, as I mentioned earlier, provided around 812,000 pensioner households with support each winter, an investment of around £101 million. And clearly there are a number of pensioners who are not eligible for pension credit or other low-income benefits who also require additional support. On the second point she makes around zonal pricing, we recognise there are trade-offs and complexities, and I mentioned this earlier on today in the debate around zonal pricing, and are aware that its introduction needs to be done in a way that doesn't have significant impacts for all market participants. However, as I also mentioned earlier on, the current system that we have is not fit for purpose. It requires reform, and I urge that reform to take place.
And Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government supports the adoption of heat networks to improve energy efficiency and tackle fuel poverty. But these systems are not covered by the Ofgem price cap. And my constituent reports developers increasing price by 150%. In relation to fuel poverty, can the Minister advise how the Scottish Government is protecting residents using heat networks for being overcharged by developers or factors, and if they will raise the issues with Ofgem or the UK Government?
Minister. Thank the member for making those observations, and I sympathise with some of what he says. Clearly, there is a need to ensure that heat networks are regulated. As the member alludes to, that power lies with the UK Government and its agencies, but we do make that point to the UK Government, because if we are going to see an increase in the use of heat networks across Scotland, which I hope we will, then we have to, at the same time, undertake the work that's necessary to reassure consumers that we are dealing with a fair market and not one that's subject to the kind of problems the member mentions.
Thank you. That concludes the ministerial statement. I'll allow a moment or two for front benches to organise.